Great. Well, I want to thank you all for being here, and I'd like to thank the organizers of this Why Now event in Yokogawa for inviting me to speak today. I'll be speaking about how digital transformation enables autonomous polymer operations. And my name is Alex Reed. I'm co-founder and CEO of Fluence Analytics, a venture-backed technology company working in this digitalization space. We'll be covering three core topics today. One is just a quick overview on the polymer industry, since maybe not all of you are familiar with it. Two, a context for autonomous operations, and then three, our enabling technology example. And the subtopic here, based on the themes of this conference, I selected was on the edge, because I think it fits very nicely within that discussion. So a quick high-level view here of the polymers. Is a very large trillion-dollar industry, and everything from commodity materials to specialty materials. And really what it does is it makes our modern life possible. These are the building blocks of things that you and I use on a daily basis. You know, transportation, construction, medicine, packaging, you name it. This is the backbone of the modern economy. And in this industry, what we see are a couple different production paths. So first, on the commodity side, we see a lot of continuous processing, high volume production. These are usually large integrated petrochemical sites. And an interesting trend we've also started to see is as applications broaden, the end use performance becomes particularly critical. So you're seeing specialty composites and all these tailored materials and functionalized materials. So the commodity world is even shifting to be more and more specialized as these performance needs are more critical in these applications. And just like any manufacturing, you would expect big focus on cost, yield, and quality enhancements. On the specialty polymer side, so we see this is batch processing, typically low volume, higher margin. This is farther up the value chain, leveraging a number of different feedstocks that come from that petrochemical world, and some are bio-based now too. And what we see is a high product mix. So typical plant might have 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 SKUs that they target at specific applications, and they're constantly updating products. They're trying to look for that edge, meet new customer requirements. So there's a very high pace, fast paced, innovative process around launching new products in this industry. And again, just like commodity, they're also focused on cost, yield, and quality improvements. And just to summarize that even more specifically, this is the trend of everyone is trending this way in the world, right? So we're seeing continuous optimization just to stay competitive. That's just to keep up. So then if you want to even differentiate, you really got to look in and drill into one or more of these areas. So some companies are particularly focused on cost improvement. They want to gain market share, increase their margins, and be more competitive in pricing. Others are particularly focused on launching the next great product, improving their quality, tightening their specifications to differentiate from competition. And everyone wants to just get more out of their assets, so improve their yields without having to invest a whole lot in new assets. And now we're seeing a very, very big push. I mean, this is an existential issue affecting all of us with the ESG angle. And so the more you can do with less, the better. And even if you can find ways to enable that circular economy, going from that end material back to a feedstock and maybe back through to an end material using existing assets. So there's some very interesting trends in that space. But the other ones are standard areas that everyone's always trying to push and drive to optimize. Some of the things that we're seeing in the process industry are just reflective of the environment. I mean, we have so much rapid change. You have companies, everyone's focusing on operational and profit optimization. How do you have specific case to improve the economics in each of your plants or whatever you're trying to do. On the supply chain side, this one's particularly acute now. We're seeing this all over the world, and higher visibility, optimizing the paths through your supply chain. It's absolutely critical. Shifting demographics of the workforce. So yeah, that's another big issue. As I mentioned before, the existential sustainability issue, that's now in front and center and focus. And because of that, you just continuous growth, continuous change. That's where the business environment is today. This is just how it is now. And throw on top of it all this COVID-19 pandemic we've all been dealing with for now, almost 2 years. So this has just created quite a challenging environment to operate and optimize. And so one thing has become clear to me, and I think to a lot of us, is that all these challenges really are leading us towards one thing, and that's autonomous operations. We do have to get closer and closer to this goal of full autonomy. What does that mean in each of these situations? So say it's on the operational and profit optimization side, it means very, very specific data-driven operational feedback control. So I mean, we're really trying to use more and more data to understand very, very specific problems, to solve them and drive those improved economics. On the supply chain side, what does that mean? That means we need accurate, hyper-connected supply chains that truly become on demand and connected. On the workforce demographics, we're all experiencing this. We're going from, in many cases, very qualitative tribal knowledge that has kept certain assets running for a long time, and trying to layer in as much as we can to make that quantitative. So we need more data. We need the input from qualitative to merge that together and actually get to a truly objective way to operationalize the assets. On the circular economy, I mean, first step is just maximum efficiency. So with an autonomous approach, we could ideally get to an equilibrium of efficiency. And then in an environment that's rapidly changing, we need highly responsive operations. We need to be able to move quickly, adapt in all these different areas. And finally, what COVID has made clear is we do need more remote ready operations. We need to be able to continue operating, continue managing the supply chain, even if you can't have everyone in the same location at all times. So that is a very big development that we've seen. I borrowed this slide from our friends at Yokogawa. I think it's a great overview of this path, this shift from just level 0 industrial automation all the way to 5 on the autonomy scale. And a lot of us understand, if you read this, it's pretty clear, because you look at the assets, you look at how companies are running today. 0 and 1 are actually quite common. 2 is more common depending on the scale and scope of the world you're operating in. Semiconductor, automotive, you might see even more than, for example, in process industry. So it is an interesting spectrum. So I'm focusing specifically on the polymers today. And my experience is that really, I'd say at least 80% or more of it is in that automation world, and not much has really gone to the semi-autonomous or above. So I think there's still a long way to go to get to industrial autonomy. And so looking at this problem, was thinking about what are some of the key enablers that you really need in place to get to that full autonomous operation. So first, obviously, you need as much measurement and data as you can get, so that you can make those decisions. So right now, I think we're still trying to build up an understanding of what data do we need to do this. You need to have a foundation of autonomous ready assets. You need to have data analytics and knowledge algorithms. So how do you take the data you're gathering to actually draw those insights and understand how you're going to drive the autonomous control, because that needs to be developed. You don't just flip a switch, have some data, and all of a sudden get to full autonomous control. So there's a lot of work that would need to be done here. And then, actually implementing and driving that control, and then continually optimizing it. So some of the questions are, are we actually recording all the needed parameters for data-driven control? So that's first step. That's a very important question to ask ourselves. Are the assets we're trying to drive towards autonomous control modern enough for that? Do we know what to do with the data to optimize? Do we even know, if we had all the right data, what we would do to optimize? You know, that's a big question, and sometimes it's open-ended and we don't know the answer. And can we actually action that data? Can we get there? So like I said, focusing on this first step of, are we recording all the needed parameters? This now takes us to our very specific case, because as you know, as I'm sure all of us know, this is a multi-solution, multi-pronged problem in all these different parts of each business. This is, you know, so what we're looking at is one subset in a very operationally focused kind of control approach in the polymer side. So I'll be diving into that now. Here's some more background. So some of the critical things that companies are interested in measuring are molecular and mechanical properties of their polymers. So they're looking at things like the microstructure or the architecture of the molecule, the molecular weight. They're looking at, you know, viscometry, melt point, all kinds of stuff to truly understand. I mean, fundamentally, what they use all this for is to understand how the material is going to perform in its end use application. And so that's really what companies are selling to their customers, is performance. And so that's what we're looking at here in the industry. And then you see on the way that's done now in the lab, there's a number of different methods. You got GC, HPLC for that monomer approach, GPC for your molecular weight, FTIR. So there's a whole suite of tools currently being used in labs to tackle a number of those different measurements that I highlighted earlier. And so fundamentally, what a key issue here is there's a natural bottleneck in relying on an offline single point lab measurement. And if you're trying to drive further and further autonomy, if you want to get tighter control, obviously sometimes you might have 1 to 2 to 3, 4 hours of lag time and you have one data point. It's going to be very hard to control a process simply based on that. And so that's one of the key issues that we've seen. And so what our company has done is we've actually developed a technology. You know, we're a spin out from Tulane University, and we were working on this for a number of years, working with chemical companies looking to optimize their production process. And we developed this patented ACOMP system, automatic continuous online monitoring of polymer reactions. And really what we're doing is it's a multi-detector, multi-parameter measurement to measure molecular properties in real time. And so we have a fully integrated hardware system, everything from the sampling to the automation inside the box to the actual analysis software you see here that's interpreting all that data to provide that real-time output. And then what that really allows us to do is, with today a human in the loop, so as you can see, it goes into a control room, having that real-time data and that human in the loop, we're able to start to go to this, you know, take advantage of this measured deviation detection to intervene and start to optimize and control at that first stage. So that looks more like this. If you're in a continuous environment, say this is a property that you want to, you know, control for. You have your process here running in real time, and you have a window of a spec that you want to hit. So really your goal is to get into the middle of this window as quickly as possible and always stay in that window until you transition. Fundamentally, that's the objective. And here what we see is you're trying to do that, but you're relying on these offline data points during your transitions, or as you have a steady state run, any kind of steady state deviation that you see outside of your specification, then you try to control back into this window. And so what that does is it means that your transitions tend to be a little more conservative because you're relying on this data. And in the process, you actually increase the amount of off-spec material to go from each grade, as you transition. And then, when you're on steady state, sometimes there are upsets. There could be feed rate issues, there could be a catalyst issue, all kinds of things can happen. And then it might be hours of disruption or deviation from the steady state before you even assess it, and then you can actually start to try to correct back. So, the value of real-time information of this is very clear, so you can understand, okay, I'm operator and control. I know when I'm trying to do these things based on the lab, but now I have that continuously. You can start to drive that optimization again with the human in the loop. On the batch side, it's similar in that you're taking advantage of a dynamic measurement. So here, this is a very simple example, but say you're making a specific recipe and you do it the same way all the time, and you've basically optimized it probably for your lowest common denominator asset. So say you have a plant network and you have a number of different reactors, and the equipment performs differently, operators perform differently, feedstocks are all different, yet you want to make sure that no matter what, you end up with the same product. You tend to just try to stick with the most conservative approach to get there. So going to a more dynamic approach allows you to take advantage of those differences and actually capture any opportunity for example, cycle time. If your reaction's actually done dynamically rather than continuing to process, you could, immediately stop and go to the next batch. And that time savings increases your total yield out of that asset. And in this case, it was actually a case we did with a customer that we've simplified here. We actually observed that there was this was unintended, but we saw it, a quality degradation as the polymerization continued. So as they knew they were done, we actually saw there was an endpoint. The over-processing actually caused the material to degrade because it's under temperature, there's stirring, things like that. So there's some other unintended consequences of that, but the key thing here would be cycle time optimization. All right, so the next, let's say you have the data you need. So now you want to go, all right, am I ready to do, autonomous operation? What does that mean? It means that you need to have, all the sensors in place. You have to have the ability to actually control all the key parameters remotely, digitally. You need to have a fairly modern control system and the right data infrastructure. So there's an infrastructure piece that you need to solve to get there. And then once you have that, you're now ready to look at how you optimize production. So dig into the data analytics and the knowledge algorithms that you need. So what does that mean? Well, it means now you have all this control system, historian data, because you have all these measurement parameters, including something like an ACOMP system. Now you have this full data set of properties and process data all in one database in your historian. You also continue to have lab data. That is your specification you release to customers. You might do it less now, but at least you have those checkpoints along the way, or you're testing inbound materials, whatever it is. And then you have your ERP information. You have your inventory, your raw materials, etc., coming from your supply chain. So you pull all that together, and that's how you start to design your optimization strategies, your control strategies, you troubleshoot issues. So having these three things gets you to that first step of being able to get towards that autonomous control, to actually make those decisions for control. All right, so then really taking that and actually converting it into insights. How do we get there? In our case, really what we're looking at is, now we know we're trying to drive to a specific property, a specific endpoint, whatever it is. And what we've done is effectively, to close the loop, we're going from just measuring the deviation to actually predictively assessing it and taking corrective action. And so what that means is you've actually designed software that would automatically, based on your set points or your targets, take the corrective action as a deviation is assessed. And that way you're able to fully optimize your production. And it's done without the human in the loop at that point, because you've trained the algorithms to take those actions in that earlier stage. And so how do we get to there, to that autonomous control world? One of the things I like to highlight is you always, to make this happen, you have to have wins. You have to have case studies that deliver value, that have ROI, and then build up on those to do all that, because to make all the investments you need is going to be significant. We all know the payoff is going to be there, but you have to be able to guide it along the way with the right justification. So I do like to highlight is that, all right, so even at level 1, you're adding new data with the human in the loop. You're going to have high ROI on a lot of these types of projects where you're adding data, you're using it to optimize even just manually. The next step, though, is what I was saying about that process knowledge and data context. So now you have the data, you're able to extract even more value because you're starting to get larger and larger data sets. You're able to use that to guide R&D. You're able to start making certain decisions that you couldn't make before about maybe inventory scheduling or plant manufacturing optimization. So where to add more assets, where to shift production to on a global network. And then finally, if you look at where you want to go to the control, that's where you're really going to get the most value, is once you've built that layer of data and the knowledge, is to actually implement it to the point where you have essentially a flywheel of optimization throughout the whole organization. And I do like to highlight that probably most of the value you're going to capture is going to be beyond just getting some initial data. So this is a long road for autonomous operations, but we all know that to get there, you have to start somewhere. And finally, for us, what we see is a big vision around a fully linked supply chain. So imagine where those end use applications I was talking about, whatever it is, tire manufacturing, packaging, construction, whatever, semiconductor, you have very specific needs coming from customers, and they're able to basically link that to the manufacturer and get almost customized material, but made in a commoditized way, enabled by all of this data, all these systems that have been developed. And so to me, that really would be almost the holy grail, is you could have like a mass customized approach to serving this customer base that looks and feels like a commodity business because of how efficient it's operated. And then that also obviously fields back, it connects back down the value chain. So then you've completely optimized all your inputs, where you have your asset investments that take advantage of the feedstocks. So it really gives you a very interesting opportunity to link all these things. And to get there, as I was saying, you really need this first layer of the data, process, and the control. And so without that, we're never going to get to the point where you could even entertain an idea like fully linking this supply chain more than, it's already very well linked, but really to get it to the point of full autonomy is what we're trying to do. And so again, I view this as the North Star, going to full autonomous operations, tackling each of these challenges head on with the technology solutions as I outline them, really is where the industry needs to go, especially in this polymer space, but really worldwide across industries, and some are farther along than others. And I think eventually, we'll have to get there to operate at the scale that the world will need as it continues to grow. And so in closing, looking back at this chart, I think just to operate and compete effectively in this changing world, I think 80% or more of producers will need to be here in the next decade in this industrial autonomy world. Now, that doesn't mean everything's going to be a full autonomous operation, but I think more people, more companies need to be focused on getting into one of these areas as quickly as possible to be able to adapt, because the challenges will only continue to increase. That's just our challenges today that we outlined. I think there's going to be many, many more as we go. And with that, again, I'd like to thank the organizers and then open up to any questions that, look forward to hearing from the audience and answering and going a little deeper in any of the topics. Thank you.
Alex, thank you so much for your presentation. That was really good. Autonomous operation, we still have a long way to go, but I think you've demonstrated that, with the things that you've spoken about, lots of things can be done already, right? One of the questions that I got handed here was, what are the key enabling technologies today for ACOMP, that is, or those that, would have made it impossible 5 to 10 years ago? I mean, technology goes so fast. I would even say last year wasn't possible, this year might be. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because as you noted, technology is always moving quickly, especially in this world of sensors and control. And some of the tools in our system, because it is a smart system that we use, are smaller sensors. So the footprint has shrunk, the performance has gone up, the precision of some of the types of measurements we need to make is very, very tight. And honestly, we wouldn't be able to do that without those leaps and bounds of performance gains that we've seen in the past several years. So things like inflow, temperature, pressure, all those that you would normally use in a plant, we also use at small scale in our system. And those actually dictate the autonomy of our platform. So yeah, we wouldn't be able to do it without it.
So the decision making happens online based on real-time information, and that integration 5-10 years ago was a bit more complicated, or maybe not even possible.
Absolutely, because it happens even within our system. So in our actual measurement tool, we're doing the same thing that we're trying to actually sell to the customer as well.
Yep. Awesome. One other, because I see we're running close to time, what do you see as the biggest hurdle to achieving autonomous operation? I know you've addressed it a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things we see is just the scope and scale of what we need to do. I mean, it's huge. So really being able to give us the opportunity to tackle it one piece at a time, as I said, follow small projects and get those small wins. Because if you look at it and say, oh, this is too big of an investment, I can't get there, you're overwhelmed. So just like you tackle any big project, one piece at a time.
Yeah. It's like eating an elephant, right? It's a bad example, I know, because we shouldn't be eating elephants, but I mean, one bite at a time, right?
Absolutely.
So, no. Alex, thank you so much. Very learning-full session. On behalf of Yokogawa, thank you so much. And to all of the other visitors, I saw a lot of claps coming in, so people obviously found it interesting. Thank you again for that, and I hope you and other will visit some other sessions before the end of Why Now 2021. Thanks, Alex. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
See you, man.